Kelly, we're live.
I know you're getting so much better at it.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
You
Yeah. A little tan.
yeah, right? I would be bright red.
Yeah, you would.
So for every for everybody who does not know, and frankly speaking, those that are watching this right now, first of all, thank you so much for joining LinkedIn Live. Kelly Sanchez, the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert, is my bi-weekly conversation partner. However, 2 weeks ago, she wasn't able to make it because she was going to, I don't want to give away the news. Kelly, talk about what you were up to the last roughly 2 weeks.
Yes. So I ended up going to Mexico. So I went to Riviera Maya, which is 20 minutes away from Cancun. And it was amazing. The resort was beautiful. Weather was great. It even rained 2 of the days we were there. So we got to see a little bit of that. But yeah, it was good. So much fun.
That's awesome. Good deal. Well, we're glad to have you back, though you may not be as excited as me over here. So.
No, this is good. I'm sad that I missed last or 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Indeed. I know it goes quick. It feels like it was last week. Well, so again, I want to say thanks to everybody who's here today. Our topic, and here in just a second, I will add it to the comment section. But we are going to be talking about something that's very timely right now. Everybody that spends any amount of time on LinkedIn will be very familiar with the hashtag the Great Resignation. And it's a big deal right now, right? Obviously, there's seems to be in certain spaces a talent shortage, and there seems to be a relative exodus from a lot of jobs. So today, our topic is going to be on onboarding and retention. And just like I said, I'm going to add a comment in here. If you have questions as it relates to this topic, please go ahead and pop them into the comment section. We will take them in real time. If you don't have questions, that's okay. We're prepared to speak to these two things. But Kelly, maybe we can start with our warm-up game and give me an opportunity to add this comment. And I just want to say too to everybody joining us, please like, comment, share. That's going to get this out in front of other people, and we'll have a better dialogue. But yeah, Kelly, let me go ahead and mute myself. Still haven't figured out a better way than this, and then we'll get into it.
Okay. So I'm in the office today, so I forgot my cards, but I just Googled like funny questions, icebreakers, and there's a couple of throwbacks in this. So let's see. Okay. If you could bring back any fashion trend or old slang, what would it be? Ooh, fashion trend. This is my go-to. It's always been my go-to, and I love it. And I'm glad that it's kind of coming back, but I don't really know, or at least in my life, I feel like it's always there. You can kind of see like this is like a choker, but it's part of my shirt. But I love choker necklaces, and that is like from my like middle school and high school. But I will always wear them, always love them, and that is a fashion trend that should always be in style.
Okay, this is my kryptonite. I don't even know.
Old slang. What's an old saying? An old slang term that you would bring back?
So let's stay on fashion because
Okay.
better there.
Okay.
And that's not good, by the way. But I don't even know what the latest trends are. I think that like semi-grunge is coming back in style. I see kids wearing baggy clothes these days, and that was a thing when I was a kid. I'm not going to say I enjoy it, but I am just going to date myself because I swear Janko jeans are a thing again. Are they? I feel like they are. Maybe they're sweatpants now.
Like the wide leg.
Yeah. It's nuts.
Like the wide leg pants. Yeah.
So again, I'm not saying I'm happy that this is happening. I'm just noticing that that's a thing. And I never thought it would come back after it went away. I was like, there's zero chance that's coming back. What I like is, classic stuff, right? Like, I think it's, we're about to enter into the roaring 20s post-COVID, I feel like. So maybe we'll see some
Ooh, yeah.
bob haircuts and some top hats, nice suits, some fitted suits. That'd be good.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that style.
All right, good deal. Thanks so much for stalling for me and buying some time again. For those of you who have just joined, we are talking today about onboarding and retention. And this always works best for us if you put your questions into the comment section. You've got two experienced recruiters here, and our goal for these lives is to try to add value and address your questions in real time. That being said, we are prepared to speak to this topic, whether we get questions or not. One more thing I want to mention, or I shouldn't say one more thing. I just want to mention again that Kelly Sanchez is joining me today. She is the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. So this is a very top of mind topic / conversation that they're having ongoing in your organization. Kelly, can you talk a little bit about why we chose to do both of these topics together? Since, in and of themselves, they could take, we could take either one in one of these LinkedIn lives alone, right? So why are we talking about both?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we can talk about just onboarding in one future episode and then also get more detailed into retention as well. But the reason we're talking about both of them together is because, well, at least for me and you, we see it hand in hand. Like the way you onboard definitely reflects the experience of keeping your people and better retention. And we'll get into more of the details about why we see it that way. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Right. And so to your point, we would both argue, we talked about this offline. We've talked about this many times. In terms of things that we focus on professionally, I'd say this is an area that both of us are very passionate about. But retention begins with onboard. And we'll even back it up to, where we think onboarding begins. And I think that's probably the best place for us to start. I just want to thank Jeff Gardner, JG, for the comment he made about, why he thinks the Great Resignation is kind of occurring and how he thinks this is a good thing, because basically he thinks this is an opportunity for people who have not been valued at their organizations to go and find, another job where they will be valued. And that's absolutely correct, right? I think generally speaking, that's what we're seeing. So yeah, Kelly, this may be a debatable moment, but this is definitely something where you and I both agree. Where does onboarding begin as far as you're concerned?
Onboarding. So what side do you want me to take? Well, actually, I think onboarding, I'm not going to give you a side. Onboarding begins the first interaction. So I will say talent acquisition, we are the first line of defense, the first introduction, whatever you want to call us. But really, talent acquisition or HR, whatever, they are the first point of contact within the company.
Yeah, 100%. And to your point, that's, exactly it. So a lot of people think about onboarding as, your first day on the job, maybe even like when you get an offer or what happens between an offer and your first day. To your point, you and I agree that it is actually during the recruitment process. And whether that's you've applied to a job and a recruiter or HR generalist is reaching out to you, or you're not looking and somebody here on LinkedIn, and by somebody, I mean a recruiter in all likelihood, is contacting you about a job. So to your point, that's where I think I agree with you. That's where the onboarding process begins. And basically, again, there's a blurry line here, but onboarding bleeds into retention. So we've already discussed that you and I agree that in order to retain people, you can't just focus on like retention programs once they've, started their job, because you've got to make sure their experience from the very beginning is a positive one. All of that stuff is cumulative and it leads to a retention strategy, if you will. So I think, we did get a question. I want to make sure we address that question here, like right away, but just to give the audience here a little bit of context as to where we're going. We want to talk a little bit about common mistakes we see in the onboarding and retention space. And then we want to finish up with the relatively low hanging fruit that you don't need a big budget to do in order to like make those two areas a much more positive experience for candidates and employees. Before we do, we got a question. So let me just pitch this one over to you if you don't mind. I'm sure I'll have some thoughts about it too. All right. So in your opinion, and I assume your opinion means Kelly, why are companies, everyone wants to ask Kelly the questions, not me. In your opinion, why are companies more willing to pay sign-on bonuses and often more in total compensation to new employees rather than rewarding their experienced employees? It's a great question.
Ooh, that is good. I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, you go for it.
All right. So here's what I think. And of course, the challenge with a question like this is it's a generalization. But to your point in your question, implied in your question is you see this happen a lot, right? Here's what I think. I think that, current employees, we often assume because they are oftentimes, right? Especially if they're performing, we assume they're happy, they're engaged, they're, I don't want to say that companies take them for granted, but the reality is they probably do, right? To some degree. So current employees are often thought of a little bit less as it relates to compensation because they're already here. And especially if they're contributing, it implies that they're happy, right? Whereas it's really tough to get new employees right now. So I don't think companies are necessarily thinking about what message that sends to their current employees when they offer a sign-on bonus to someone new. Mm-hmm. They think of this again as two separate areas, right? They think of onboarding completely separate from retention, which is again, going back to our overall thesis and argument that they are absolutely connected. So in other words, they're not thinking at all about what that message is that's being sent to your current employees. They're thinking about, we need to fill this job. It's really tough. If this is what's going to take to get this person over the finish line is to give them a big sign-on bonus, then yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. It solves the problem of getting someone in the door. It doesn't necessarily compute, I think, and I should be careful how I say that. There are a lot of very smart executives out there, probably far smarter than me, but I just don't think that they're taking into consideration the message that that's sending to their current employees. So that would be my kind of initial thought on it. That being said, there are plenty of companies right now that are doing a lot to try to level set with their internal employees. This market that we've seen for probably about the last 12 months, Kelly, correct me if you think that that's shorter or longer, but it has accelerated so significantly that it's almost impossible it would be a multi-million-dollar decision for many companies to try to level set their internal people to what people who are, looking right now are going to get offered. So it's a really challenging problem. And I think that we can talk in a minute about how I think, you can address it or fix it, et cetera. But that's my thought as to the reason why that's happening. Did that buy you enough time to think about a better answer to that question?
Yeah, no. And I was thinking more like analytically, like trying to break it out, like financially. I don't know why my mind went that way, but what you're saying definitely, I think, aligns with the market. And I would say as well, kind of to the Great Recession, is people are feeling undervalued. And it really depends. Is it the pay? Is it the appreciation? Do they feel recognition? Like there's so many different factors. But again, my mind went to the comp piece of it. And I would say this is now, I've seen a lot of companies looking at their internal teams because of that. And like, hey, if in order to hire someone new, we're going to have to bring them in 20, 30, 40%. Like, is that reasonable? Is that fair? And so really our compensation teams on every company are super busy now having to do comp analysis to make sure, hey, where are we at? What's going on, in order to make sure that they're not losing their own internal team and that it's fair for everyone. So really good question. I just think it's honestly tough, but I'm glad that it's being asked because now it's opening up companies' eyes to, hey, let's figure out a solution or something to bridge that gap.
Yeah, again, just not to belabor it, but I think you really have to address both.
Yeah.
The smartest companies are going to be trying to address their current employees to be proactive, make sure they're not looking elsewhere, as well as, again, it's, if you compare this to, I think a good analogy is a real estate market, right? Sometimes it's a seller's market and sometimes it's a buyer's market. And right now it is absolutely an employee or a talent or a candidate, however you want to phrase that. It's their market. They have the leverage, they have the upper hand, especially in certain industries. So they can command a higher amount, and if employers have an opening that's super critical, they're kind of just, they're forced to offer big sign-on bonuses, offer above, salaries above their current salary bands or what their current employees are being paid. So you have to try to address both, but it's also going to swing back at some point, because they always do. So great question. Thank you so much. All right. So again, for anybody who's just joined us, thank you so much for joining. Kelly Sanchez, the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. Scotty John, focused on both talent acquisition as well as customer acquisition here at KēSTA I.T. We are talking about onboarding and retention today, and we would love your questions. If you have questions for us about that topic, please pop them in the comments section. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next part of this, which is some of the things we see on both the onboarding and retention areas, which again, we would argue are, very connected. Some of the things we see that are just mistakes that companies are making in these areas. So why don't we start with, just from the very top, again, onboarding starts at the very first interaction with talent acquisition, HR, or for that matter, a third-party recruiter, who should be an extension of your group's talent acquisition. What mistakes are we seeing right now at that part of the process, Kelly?
I would say complex processes, lack of communication, lack of check-ins. I would say a lot of paperwork that's unorganized. Yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you can't simplify things so much, but we like to try. It's a lot of rules replacing reason, right? That's one of my favorite, it's one of my favorite sayings. Let's try not to let rules replace reason. I'm going to give Chad Beals credit because that's where I first learned it, and I've used it ever since. But I think to your point, asking somebody to fill out an application after they've gone through the interview process, is there a way we can figure that out and not do that? Ghosting, right? Or just not being responsive. I mean, how hard is it for a recruiter to tell somebody, hey, I haven't heard anything yet, but I'll let you know as soon as I do? That should be a pretty quick email or text. It shouldn't be that difficult, right? To let people who especially have interviewed know. Also, you as a recruiter reaching out to someone to then ask for too much. We talked a little bit about assessments in the past. So I reach out to you, and the first thing I ask you to do, even though you said, well, I'm happy where I am, but all right, I'll consider it. The first thing I ask you to do is take a 90-minute assessment. I think we're seeing companies not necessarily connecting that's, asking a lot from somebody who's a passive candidate, right? Those would be some of the other things I would just generally add. What about on the retention side?
I would say when they start day one, making sure that they have a buddy that you're checking in on with them, making sure that they're okay. It's a lot of information as a newbie coming into an organization, trying to learn the culture, trying to learn people and teams and how everything connects. So if you're not there, that individual is going to feel so lost and they're going to be like, see you later. Like they don't value me. They don't appreciate me. I was just a hire for this position. So see ya.
Indeed. Yeah. I see it on LinkedIn a lot, this really nice package of branded water bottles and, computer mouse pads and all sorts of just stuff, right? Swag, which is awesome, right? That's great.
Yeah.
But is your manager making sure you know what your first week is going to look like and what their expectation is? Like all the branded swag in the world, that's great. I mean, giving someone a gift, if you don't have that, by the way, as a manager, as a hiring manager, it's not super hard to try to find out what somebody's interested in prior to them starting and just give a very small kind of token gift as an appreciation. The other thing you could do, send a thank you letter to their spouse because you're asking their spouse to spend most of their time with you. Those are things that they don't cost anything. And you could do that, create an amazing onboarding, first day / first week onboarding experience for your new employee. And like you said, Kelly, from a retention standpoint, that really matters. Like the first, 90 days is absolutely critical for long-term retention. If someone feels like they're clear on what's expected of them and they've got all the tools they need to do it and the coaching and direction, that's again, oversimplification, but that goes a really long way to retaining them for the long haul. The other thing I would mention on retention is this, is maybe more common verbiage these days. But I think, it's relatively recently been kind of come into the zeitgeist, so to speak, but it's stay interviews. So if anybody's not familiar with what I mean when I say stay interviews, every, fourth or fifth one-on-one, being very deliberate in asking your employee, how do you feel about things? And are you getting what you need here? You might even address the fact that, hey, I know there's a lot of companies out there paying crazy amounts of money for people with your skill set. I want to keep you. How can I do that? Right. Trying to understand what motivates your people and what's going to keep them keep them with you. Money's not everything. Appreciation, gratitude, making sure they know that you're super grateful for what they bring to the table. All of that can go a really long way. And that's something that I recommend you formalize as part of your process. And again, I'd say call it stay interview, call it whatever you want, but just focus on those difficult questions a lot of people don't want the answers to, right?
Yeah. And it's hard to ask the question too, because they can be looking, but if you have the relationship, it should be an easy conversation to have. Like, hey, actually I was looking, but I decided to stay because this was it, or whatever the reason may be. And it goes. And I think that's also key as part of the onboarding and retention. They have to trust talent acquisition, the recruiter that they're working with, their hiring leader, because there's some tough conversations up front, negotiating benefits and all of that as well. And you want to start off on the right foot too.
So it's funny, we kind of bled into, not just the things we see that companies are not doing correctly, but also the things that they could do that would be helpful. But to your point, we did talk about a lot of the things that we don't see companies doing today in terms of, both onboarding and retention. Let's kind of revisit onboarding. What are some things that they can't, like companies can do? Some relatively easy, again, low hanging suggestions for just improving that process and making sure that you're going to start off this relationship, because that's really what it is, on the right foot. What do you think, Kelly?
Yeah, I would say communication. If there's lack of communication, apologize, or a delay, or if you don't know something, over communicate. So the candidate feels like they're taken care of, even though you may not have anything to say to them, or, hey, I don't know what's going on with your paperwork or whatever the case may be, but I'm tracking it down. They have to feel important and not forgotten.
That's so key. And to your point, the only thing I would add to that, because I think it's truly a differentiator, and maybe because I'm a recruiter. I've been a recruiter forever. I never kind of ventured too far into the HR employee relations and certainly not the legal aspect of what we do. So because you're more on that side of things, Kelly, tell me where I'm missing the mark here.
Okay.
But I think transparency is a huge differentiator.
Mhm.
Like, people want to know feedback, give it to them. You know, you might have made a mistake or something might have happened. Instead of not telling them that, explain what happened. Am I missing something? Is there like too much risk that I'm opening myself or my company up to when I'm doing that? Or legitimately, is there a good reason not to be more transparent with candidates through the first part of the, onboarding process?
Not anything that comes to mind. Like, and Scotty, like, I love this question from you because this is who you are. You're always going to be transparent, open, and this is authentically you. And it gives, honestly, the candidate a sneak peek to the company culture at KēSTA. So honestly, if a recruiter, how you're interacting with them, you feel comfortable and all of that, that should give you a preview of what the company culture should be like. So yes, if you're being transparent, you can expect transparency within the company, for example, just because we're just talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. And again, just to put a fine point on this, this primarily happens pre-employment, but I think even insofar as you're able as a leader to be transparent and explain to your people. Now I know that you can't always explain what's happening behind closed doors, but trust, starts with vulnerability. So if you're telling somebody something, if you're being transparent with people, that just goes a really long way. And again, I think in both in onboarding and retention, just to kind of tie this all together, because we're getting close to the 30-minute mark, that I think that communication and transparency could be a theme for this entire, thread that we've been talking about today. And again, hopefully this has been useful for those of you that have joined, and really appreciate you joining. I'm going to just give one more opportunity for anybody who is watching right now that would like to ask a question as it relates to, onboarding and retention, and in the context of the Great Resignation, so to speak, quote unquote.
Have you
But
heard
otherwise, I think
Great Awakening?
I think we covered a lot, Kelly, and I feel like, like I said, hopefully there's some nuggets of wisdom in that, in what we just mentioned. So
I agree. I feel like that just flew by, and I have so much more that I want to say and everything. So we'll definitely, like we mentioned earlier, we'll take each topic and take a deeper dive into conversations for future episodes.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. I think because you're not wrong. We scratched the surface. Yeah. I think it was a good start. It was a good introduction. And again, explaining why these two are so, so related and interconnected was important. But to your point, let's maybe break out the onboarding and the retention themes for future LinkedIn Lives. Thank you so much to everybody again who's watching us today. Appreciate you all. Just so you know, we do this every other week at roughly 11:30 Mountain Time. So feel free to join us in a couple of weeks. Feel free to, direct message either or both of us, or put a comment under this thread on other topics you'd like to see us cover. And we'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.